Welcome, Corey Konieczka, if I pronounced it right.
Yeah, Konieczka.
Yes, that's the first test, I think, when somebody needs to chat with you. Thank you very much for your time to join the Board Game Brothers podcast. We are doing a special episode around Star Wars on the May the 4th be with you, of course. And now you made some awesome Star Wars games. We will talk shortly of that. But first, I want to hear what is your favorite game at this moment, of course.
My favorite game at this moment. Yeah, it's a good question. The game that I've been playing the most with my local group, we've been playing Betrayal Legacy, and we've played through the whole campaign. We've got one left, and so we're going to be playing that this Friday. So I'm looking forward to it. I want to see how it all wraps up together.
Do you enjoy legacy games or sometimes?
This is the first Legacy game that I've played like from start to finish. I'm also playing Risk Legacy, and I've played a couple of other ones, but never like to completion. So it's been a wild ride. This one I feel like is it's tied together nicely, where it keeps you always guessing, and Betrayal House of the Hill is a kind of crazy, chaotic game. You either love it or you hate it.
Yeah.
But my group loves craziness, and so it's definitely been memorable.
Cool. Is it also a group that you use for playtesting, or is it just like, okay, we play board games, not my board games, but
Yeah, that's a fair question. There's just a bunch of buddies from high school that we've played games together for years and years and years. As far as playtesting, usually we'll playtest one of my games at the beginning of the night, and then we'll jump into playing some other stuff.
So honest opinions, probably.
Yeah, usually. I mean, they're pretty easygoing. They can have fun playing anything. You know those people. You just have fun being around them. You play a super boring game, and you still have a blast. So.
Yeah, that's one of the best parts about playing board games, I think.
Yes,
that is a thing to have a fun evening, and not. Sometimes it's good to have a main part about it, like with games like Twilight Imperium. It doesn't have to be. No, it is fun, but you're playing a game and not chatting with each other. But yeah, to use it as for a nice evening, that is also really great. Yeah, Corey, I know you because you designed a lot of games for Fantasy Flight Games. I've read in an interview you gave that you started there as a game designer. I was thinking, did you were designing games before Fantasy Flight Games?
Yes, but just as a hobby. I mean, it's always been a hobby of mine ever since I was a little kid. I'd always be making games. Me and my brothers would be drawing things on graph paper and making up rules for stuff. And I always thought when I was younger that I would grow up to make video games. Right. I went to school for computer science thinking, I'm going to make video games for a living. And I would make little video games to play with people. And then when I actually went to school to do computer science, I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. So I ended up changing majors. I went back to school for graphic design afterwards. But on the side, I'd still been dabbling with board games. I had card games I was playing with my friends that I just made for fun. And I just kind of fell into the Fantasy Flight job I saw posting on their website.
Yeah.
And I'd been playing Twilight Imperium, and I was working on like some homebrew rules for it. And I thought, whoa, wonder if I could turn that into a real job. And so I applied for it, and turns out now I get to do it for a living.
Yeah, and I think that's quite a unique thing, because maybe it was in the early games of board gaming industry that you could have a full job for designing games at a publisher, because most of the times you see game designers, they're making great games and they have ideas and they need to shop at publishers. Can you please publish my game? And if you don't, like if I see at Cosmos, another German company does it, or like Corey Konieczka, he does games for Cosmos, but also at other publishers, because some publishers say, no, but this is not a game for our company. And it's quite special that you are hired by a publisher. I think that's quite special.
Yeah, I mean, I would get advice. I would have other designers ask me for advice sometimes, and I'd be like, I don't really know how to answer your questions because I've never had to freelance as a game designer. And I think most board game designers do freelance. They don't work for a company. But Fantasy Flight, they were growing at the time, and they're still pretty big.
Yeah.
They were one of the few places that had like a decent number of on-staff game designers where that was their full-time job.
Because I looked up your list at Board Game Geek, and you see big IPs like Gears of War, Lord of the Rings. Funny if you say, first I want to be a computer game developer, and you made a game from a computer.
Yeah.
What is harder? Is it harder to make a board game from a computer design or from like a movie like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars?
Oh, that's an interesting question. When you're making a board game based off of a video game, it's a game based on a game. And so it's a little tricky. You don't want to just replicate exactly what that game did, because then people play the game and they'll be like, why am I not just playing the video game right now?
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are going to be things that people like about the video game that you're going to want to replicate. Like you mentioned Gears of War. There's cover that you can hide behind when you're fighting enemies. There's emergence holes that the horde can come up from. And so you want to capture those important elements, but you don't want to just make the game exactly the same. I think for StarCraft, the board game, that's another great example where we were making a board game based off a video game, but we didn't want it to just feel like you were playing a single session of StarCraft. Instead, we like zoomed out so that there are many planets that you're fighting over. And as opposed to being on a small little map where we're all fighting over, instead you get kind of this galactic view, which gave you kind of a different perspective on the same game while keeping the same units that you can build, the same strategies. And I think it's important to take a fresh perspective. I think it helps.
Yeah. And maybe when you have a movie, you have a story, sort of to deal with it. So I think when I see this, when you're designing a game from a computer game, you have a few mechanics, but maybe you're more free in the story to wrap around it. And if you have a story, you have those noticeable things that are happening in that story that you want to keep in a board game.
Yeah, I mean, it varies depending upon who you're working with. Some IP owners are much more protective about the story and they want it to be told a certain way. Other people want you to create new things in their world that they've built. And so I think in that regard, honestly, video games and working on a movie, they're very similar because they both have a story to them. And it just comes down to how you're telling that story and what sort of freedom you have to. Are you trying to tell a new story, or are you trying to retell the events that happened in that video game or movie?
You say a lot of IPs. That is what Fantasy Flight games have. Is it like you're in a meeting and I see Christian Peterson is the owner of Fantasy Flight Games, and he says, okay, we have now IP for StarCraft or Gears of War, and come up with a game with it? Or did you maybe have an idea like, okay, I need to make something about Lord of the Rings, I have this feeling, I have this design, and you're going to him and say, okay, we need this IP so we can publish this game?
I mean, at Fantasy Flight Games, the IPs almost always came from management. They would be working on different licensing deals, and once they established that, they're like, hey, we now have the Battlestar Galactica license, let's figure out what game we want to make. It's, I think, a lot more difficult to say spend all this time developing a game idea when you don't have the rights to this thing, and now you have to go out and hunt it down. So yeah, at the time, Christian, he was the founder of the company, he was the owner of the company. He's since sold it off, but he was usually the one who came up with the pitches of, this is a new license. We just got StarCraft. We just got Battlestar. We just got Lord of the Rings. Let's make this game. Yeah. And then we would go and we'd brainstorm with him. Okay, what do we want this game to be? Who are the players? What are they trying to do? Is it a board game? Is it a card game? Is it cooperative, competitive? Kind of deciding upon those basic elements before you even start.
Yeah. So streamlining it to a smaller ID or some kind of IDs.
Yeah, coming up with a pitch, a vision, as we call it.
Yeah. And a lot of games you designed are quite big and quite epic. Also the game length. Is that something you need to have to put everything in a game to give the feeling of that IP or to set that theme?
I think honestly, I think it was a mix of two things. First of all, I think that's what Fantasy Flight Games was known for. That's what people liked about their games. We were unapologetically epic. When you're playing Twilight Imperium, you knew it was going to be the full day.
Yeah.
Now, granted, not all Fantasy Flight Games are full day affairs, but generally they were known for being games that were complex. They were hobby games. They weren't necessarily for you to play with your kids. But at the same time, as a game designer, I've found myself kind of moving away from that as I've grown older. I don't necessarily have time to play an 8-hour long game anymore. So as I've kind of been working on games through the years, my games have slowly gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. But if you look back at StarCraft and Rune Wars and some of these other games, they were
big,
huge rule book, many hours to play it. I still enjoy those games. I just don't tend to play as many of them as I used to.
No, and I come back later at your own publisher, Unexpected Games.
Sure.
Is that where the idea started? Like, okay, I'm gonna start make other games, but a bit smaller, and I need to have there another place for necessary or needed.
Sure, that was certainly part of it. I mean, I felt like I'd made I'd been with Fantasy Flight Games for 13 years, and I had lots of ideas for games that just weren't necessarily a good fit for them. And so going off and making my own studio was an opportunity to kind of explore those and to see what other sorts of games I could make.
All right. We need to talk about Star Wars because that's the main part about this episode in this podcast. First of all, do you have a favorite Star Wars movie or a character?
Yeah, I mean, Empire Strikes Back has always been my favorite Star Wars movie. If I had to go back and pick again, it's been a long time since I've revisited whether it still is, but I think it's consistently a great film. Han Solo is probably my favorite character.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the classic era was what I grew up with, and so that's where my heart is.
Cool. Yeah, I had a VCR for Attack of the Clones, so I played that movie so much. So yeah, that's one of my that's my favorite movie. But yeah, serious, Star Wars is amazing. Have you for yourself a favorite Star Wars game that you think this is it, or
of my designs or of any game?
Any game, but the most Star Wars games are by your design, I think so.
So a game that's got a special place in my heart is the old Decipher Star Wars card game. The Star Wars collectible card game came out shortly after Magic came out, when everyone was making collectible card games. I got way into it. I have so many of those cards, so I haven't played it in years and years. It's a very complex game that definitely had a big impact on me as I was growing up. If I had to pick one of my own games that I designed, man, it's hard to say. I like all of them. Star Wars Rebellion's probably the one that, if I had to pick one off my shelf to play right now, I'd probably pick. But I'd also say that about Outer Rim or Imperial Assault or Destiny, it's, I don't know. I was just honestly just very fortunate to be able to work on them, and it's amazing to think that I had that opportunity.
Yeah, I played mostly Rebellion of your Star Wars games. The Outer Rim only once and Imperial Assault only once. But my brother Mark, he has the full complete collection. He's very proud of it, but he doesn't have the time to play all that content.
Yeah.
And that's also a bit of like Rebellion. You need to plan that game to have an epic feeling, because with me, when when the box is hitting the table, you're opening it and you're setting up the sides, and yeah, you're starting. You feel your heartbeat is going race, and you know the shit is on, and we're going to have an epic Star Wars night with each other. How did you do that? How did you put that tension right from up the beginning? Like, okay, I do it the most of the time with my best friend, and we are like, we are trying to block each other, and when there's a rule, okay, we need to check it because maybe I can have one unit back, or with combat we always check because we're just so on spot on each other, and that gives also a good feeling because you want to be to get the best out of each round or something.
Yeah,
because it can make a difference in that game. Is the feeling always?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just kind of find the perfect combination of a game and an IP. And with that particular game, like right from the beginning, we kind of knew we had something special. I mean, it was loosely based off of the video game Star Wars Rebellion, which I'll be honest, I tried playing it once when I was younger. It was super complex. I love the idea of it, but I never actually played it. But the idea that you've got kind of two sides in the war, you've got the Empire, you've got the Rebels. One of them has vastly more resources, more troops, more ships. The other side has far less, but they are hidden. And so the asymmetry between those two sides and the fact that right from the beginning of the game, the Rebel player has a secret that the Empire is trying to figure out. Like, I think that's where kind of the tension comes from. And it's just, it immediately gets you smiling and like, oh, okay, how can I carefully maneuver without exposing myself and maybe trying to trick him into thinking I'm somewhere else? That the back and forth between those two players is where the heart of that game is.
And how many time does such complex game from beginning to start takes? Because you need to play it a lot to put everything, because I think it's also asymmetrical that you have everything okay, or it feels okay to put out the game.
To develop a game like that, it takes up to a year. Like when I was working at FFG, sometimes I'd work on 1 to 2 games a year. Sometimes it would be 3 if like there were some small expansions or something that I was doing and they weren't full games. I want to say Star Wars Rebellion probably took, I don't know, 8 or 9 months from like when we started testing to when we finished the game and sent it to the printer. Would be my best guess.
And you say like most 1 or 2 games, and is it like you have the idea you're gonna play testing, and then at a certain point I think, okay, now I have the place in my head to start designing a new game, or do you need 2 games because sometimes you have the feeling, okay, now I'm in a mood to work with Star Wars, but if you're the whole week in the game, I can also imagine I need to take a step back and I'm designing another game.
Usually I won't start working on a new game until I finish up my current project. But I do try to find time here and there to experiment with stuff. Like I will occasionally get like inspiration, like, oh, that's an interesting idea for a game. I wonder if that would make sense. And I might spend a day just like making a quick prototype and play it on the side, see if it's any fun as I'm working on a different project. But I won't really like sink my teeth into something and really start making a game until my previous one's wrapped up.
Okay. I had a friend, he says, why does you start with Darth Vader as one of the starting commanders? And why am I not starting with Luke Skywalker at the beginning? Is there a choice?
Well, if you look at the beginning of A New Hope, Darth Vader is a big commanding presence in the Empire, and Luke Skywalker is a nobody sitting on Tatooine. So it doesn't make sense for him to start with the Rebels.
No, first he needs to wrap up some experience, and then he can show up at the battle.
Yeah, you need to convince him to join the Rebels, and then maybe you can train him to be a Jedi. Like, you gotta go through the story.
Yeah. And is there a favorite side for you to play with, the Rebels or the Galactic Empire?
I'd probably say Rebels. Like, I like being sneaky. I have fun with that. I'll take either side. They're both a lot of fun, but that's usually who I'll side towards.
Yeah. I think they play so different. So with the Rebels, you're feeling like, okay, how can I sneak into it and get a quest completed and uh, not being all my cruisers at one battle are gone from the battlefield. That feels good. There has been an expansion for Rebellion.
Mhm.
What it came up in 2016, I think.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, almost at the same time of the new movie,
Rogue.
Rogue One.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rogue.
What did you think? Okay, the battle from the base game from Rebellion needs something extra, or was it already there in the start of the designing of the game? But you thought, okay, let's take it easy on the people and don't put it in, and wait for the right moment to, if there's enough people liking the game, to add an expansion for it.
So when I designed Star Wars Rebellion, there were no plans for an expansion at the time. It was intended like, this is the complete game, it's done. And then the Rogue One movie was announced, and we're like, hey, this kind of fits right into the timeline of this game. Does it make sense for us to do an expansion? And we looked at, well, if we did do an expansion, what do players want out of it? What are they hoping for? What complaints do they have about the base game? And combat was one of the main things that people said, the base game's really good. Wish there was a little bit more meat to the combat. I wish there were a few more decisions to it. And so we said, well, let's look into it. Let's try designing some changes to the combat system. And if we like it, if we think that it makes the game more fun, then we'll put them in the expansion. So that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. So the contents for the new expansion and maybe the combat, if the combat wasn't doing a better stuff with the tactic cards, it wasn't being available in the expansion, or otherwise there was even the expansion going out.
Correct. Yeah. When we were working on the expansion, if the combat that we changed just wasn't fun, if it was worse than the base game, then we wouldn't have put it in the expansion. We would have said, we'll just put this other stuff in there.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of other things in there. There's the alternate mission decks. There's the new units. There's new missions, all sorts of stuff. So.
Yeah, at the mission with Jabba the Hutt to capture one and then kill the one for reputation. That's a great one to have. And also those those cards from the generals who they receive when you get. I had it last Saturday to just destroy a Mon Calamari cruiser before he was destroying my Death Star. All those moments are always so epic, and after a game, you're talking about those moments during that what happened in that game, and that makes it a great experience, I think.
I agree. I think that if you can make a game that people talk about afterwards, that they remember, like that's going to make an impact. I want to make games where makes you want to tell all your friends about it, makes you want to write a post on Board Game Geek telling you the story of what happened in your game. Like those are, I don't know, it just makes me smile every time I see somebody do that.
Yeah, you designed it, so. I had a listener's question, and he said, is there a chance if there will be a design about the Clone Wars? Because with the new series, it's all quite old series, it's a whole new universe with units and leaders and commanders. And I can imagine you can put a Rebellion 2.0 with a Clone Wars look on it.
I mean, if Fantasy Flight Games wanted to do something like that, like they're free to. I really have no idea what their plans would be at this moment. I know there was just Asmodee released a different Clone Wars game, I think, based off of Pandemic last year.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I would
that's
be
right.
surprised to see them release a different Clone Wars game, but I don't know. Who knows?
Okay, that's it for. Or yeah, maybe you want to tell something else about Rebellion. Otherwise,
I could talk on and on, but
yeah, yeah, me too. But I also wanted to talk about your other Star Wars games, and I had some questions about your other design game. Now, what I said, I only played Outer Rim one time. I just picked it up at a friend of mine to look at the cover and hopefully play this week another time. I really like the setting, the Outer Rim, with the new, with some different characters that doesn't have a huge role in the movies, but yeah, they are doing something really big in the Outer Rim. Lately, there has been an expansion for it, the Unfinished Business expansion, and I know my friend was really waiting for it. He was very happy to hear about it because I I think it was announced, but after that they haven't heard anything about it, and then there it was, the Unfinished Business for Outer Rim. Is that right, or?
yeah, so Outer Rim was, I think, the last game that I designed before I left FFG. And so there was always the hope that we'd get a chance to make an expansion for it. But whenever you make a new game, you never know how successful it's going to be, if it's going to sell enough copies to justify an expansion. And so I kept in touch with FFG. We still talk, and I told them, I said, guys, I think I have some time in my schedule. I could design an expansion, even though I'm not working in the company anymore, if you're interested in it. And so we figured something out, and I took a few months and I designed the Unfinished Business expansion. And then I handed it over to Tony Fanchi, who is my co-designer, who still works at FFG. And he kind of took what I had, he added to it, and he refined it and finished it up. And it's just a long process. We didn't start until the game had been out for at least a year or two. And then from there, it takes, I don't know, at least 6 months of development and then
print and
6 months of production. And so I think it didn't come out until maybe 3 years after the base game, but it's nice that it's out there now. It's nice that it's complete. And I think everybody just wanted more options, more characters, more cards. Honestly, that game, you asked me the question earlier about how often do the designers pitch the games versus the management comes say, hey, we've got this license. That was one where we had been working on Star Wars for a while, and I approached my boss. I said, listen, there's one more Star Wars board game that I'd like to make. And that's the Han Solo game, the game where you get to be Han, you can own your own ship, fly around the galaxy, do missions. There's nothing else like that in the Star Wars universe, and I want it to exist. And so we already had rights to Star Wars stuff, so we talked to Lucasfilm, we said, hey, can we do this? They said yes, and now it's the real game that you can play.
And did the expansion finish also Outer Rim now? Is it complete?
I mean, in my mind, yes, but FFG could certainly add more stuff to it if they wanted to.
Yeah, because you designed the game, but the right of the game that is now from FFG.
Yeah, I mean, any of these games that I worked on for Fantasy Flight Games, they're owned by them. They're free to make more expansions, new editions, whatever they want with it. Yeah. And I'm happy to provide feedback if they want to ask me or not. It's completely up to them.
Maybe I can ask them for a Rebellion Junior version or something for Ages of 5, so I can play with my son. But I don't think. Yeah.
You'll have to ask them.
Yeah. Now, my brother was a big fan of your Imperial Assault game. It was. He told me it's decent in the Star Wars universe. How did this idea started for you?
I mean, that's pretty much it. I think Christian came to us and said, hey, we want to make a Star Wars Descent game. And I mean, all of the Descent stuff we have to trace back to the original designer, Kevin Wilson, who made Descent Journeys in the Dark. And that came out right when I started FFG. It's a great game. And we kind of took our favorite elements from that and we took our favorite Star Wars things that we wanted to throw in there, and we found a way to, I guess, make what would a Star Wars dungeon crawl look like, right?
Yeah.
What sort of things make sense in the universe, and how do you approach it? Because it's going to be very different than working on a fantasy game, right? You're not running around killing monsters for gold and opening treasure chests, and like that's not what Star Wars is, right? And so to capture kind of the same feeling of like going on missions, sure, you're fighting against Imperial stormtroopers and you're fighting against Nexu and different, like what are the missions that you're going on? You really have to think about what makes sense in the universe, and we had to work with Lucasfilm and figure out the best way to approach it. And I think it was just super exciting to be able to make a game like that. I keep looking over here because my Star Wars games are sitting on the shelf right here. So if you see me looking over here, I'm like, oh yeah, there's Imperial Assault.
Because your content for Imperial Assault is huge, right? There are like
there are tons of expansions for that.
Yeah. And my brother said I only miss Yoda and some Ewoks in the games. So
yeah.
He hopes you're gonna make something for it.
Once again, not a question for me.
No, okay. For Imperial Assault, you're making those missions, maybe new storylines or kind of stuff. Is that something you need to talk with Lucasfilm too? Like, okay, we're doing this with this campaign. Is that something what's okay for you guys? Or
Oh, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, they are the source of Star Wars. They know it best. So anytime that you're working on story content for any sort of IP, you have to work closely with the licensor and say, hey, we'd like to tell a story on this planet or with these characters, and here's where we want the story to go. And they will coach you. They'll say, yes, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't make sense, but you could try something like this, or you could do something like this. And it's helpful to have somebody like that is protective and has a good knowledge of what we should be doing. And I imagine from the flip side, if I was in their shoes, like, you can't just let everybody do everything, or else it's not going to make any sense. People are going to be contradicting each other. Like, it's going to be crazy to manage that. I can only imagine.
Yeah, so it's good there is a company that they can overlook everything, and
they care very deeply, and they're always a pleasure to work with.
And you made Star Wars Destinies, a smaller dice game, what came up to the market, but here in the Netherlands it wasn't a big hit. I haven't played it, but it feels really something else than the other games you designed, more smaller, quicker.
Yeah, well, so that was a game that was designed by Lucas Litzinger, and I came in to help out on it. It was a dream for me because, like I said, I used to play the Star Wars collectible card game, and I absolutely loved it at the time. And so to be able to be involved in another collectible Star Wars game, and to kind of leave my own fingerprints on it, and like to decide, well, how different is this game going to be? And that's really a game about characters, right? Everybody chooses what heroes they want, and every hero plays differently, and you're building kind of a deck around them. I think there's something that customizable card games have that that board games just don't. Like, there's that sense of, after you finish the game, not only can you be talking about the game that you had, but you can be thinking about, oh, how can I make my deck better? Like, maybe if I remove these cards or add these cards, or how can I combine these together? Or maybe you play against somebody and you see them pull off some combo of cards that you've never seen before, and it gets you thinking like, oh, I never even realized that card could work with this. And then it makes you kind of create your own ideas. So it allows the players to be creative and to be involved in the design in a way, because they're designing their own decks. It's really fascinating to me and a lot of fun.
the different side is like when I played a lot of time Hearthstone, and there is a certain point that every people has that same deck at a game like Hearthstone, and then they see, okay, the modifications, or they say, okay, this card is too strong in combination with this, so they manipulate. That's harder with a collectible card game, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a bit of the power creep, or certain combinations are too good to be true or something.
Yes, I mean people will try to solve collectible games where they say this combination of cards is the best and it's got the best chance of winning, and that's just, for all the great things about collectible card games, as a designer, that's one of the toughest things, is that you don't know how people are going to use this stuff. You could try to figure out the best combinations of things, but once it's out in the wild and thousands of people are playing it, they're going to come up with ideas that you never thought of. No. And how do you react to that? And how do you errata cards? Do you ban cards? Like, these sorts of things feel bad to players, but sometimes you need to do it for the health of the game. Like, you look at something like Magic the Gathering, they've got teams and teams of people who are like deciding on these rulings and making sure that tournaments are fair, and training judges, and there's a whole different level of stuff as soon as you make the game competitive.
And that's a bit of something else, but now there's here in the Netherlands a new collectible card game, The Spirits. Ravensburger is going to start with a new collectible card game, Locana, instead of normally there was only Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. And now you see new companies coming with, I think, a good pay money casher of collectible card games. But maybe it's a new trend. I mean,
you see collectible card games kind of come in waves, where a lot of people release collectible card games at once, and there's just a flood of them in the market, and most of them don't last. And I think that that's the biggest challenge if you're trying to create a new collectible card game, is how are you going to retain players? And how are you going to compete against Pokemon and Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh? Like, those games have been around forever.
Yeah.
And almost any game that's come out since then has died in the first 3 years.
Yeah.
It's
no community,
really fascinating.
You're not playing too much, or
Yeah. There's a lot of challenges. It takes an army of people to figure out solutions and to make a game like that a success.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna talk about a few other games of great successes by you. You made Battlestar Galactica, one of I think in the board game world a very appreciated game. I didn't have the chance to play it, but I'm the owner of Unfathomable. So there's a bit of the same feel. Is there a game you prefer, Battlestar Galactica or Unfathomable?
I'll be honest, I haven't played the final version of Unfathomable.
Okay.
When they were developing it, I play tested a couple of early versions on it. I gave them some feedback, but sounds great. Sounds like they took the best parts of Battlestar and they changed the things that need to be changed, and but I can't compare the two, especially since I'm biased, of course.
And is that Battlestar Galactica game? Is that also like, okay, we have this IP of Battlestar Galactica and come up with games you need to pitch, and did you have that feeling of a hidden trader? I'm not very well known by Battlestar Galactica, the whole series. I don't know it, but yeah, you kept that feeling of Battlestar Galactica in the game, if I need to believe all the people who are talking about it.
So if my memory is correct, that game came from Christian said we'd gotten the Battlestar Galactica license. I started watching the show, and I believe our first discussion was we were on an airplane. We were flying somewhere to a convention or something. And we're sitting next to each other. He's like, all right, let's talk about Battlestar Galactica. What should a board game look like? And immediately the idea came out of, well, obviously there should be a traitor. And it should be a game we're all working together, but we're suspicious of each other because in the show, Cylons can look exactly like people, and they might not even know that they're Cylons. And so how do we capture that in the game? And so very early on, I just had a list of things in a notebook that was said, okay, everybody controls a different character. Some of you are secretly working against the others. And then once we established that that was the vision for the game, then I kind of stepped away and I said, okay, now how do I turn that into a game? What are players actually doing on their turns? What are they trying to prevent happening? How do you win? How do you lose? All of those sorts of questions that you need to answer before you can even make the game.
It's quite important to know with what IP you're working to make mechanics around the game, I can imagine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Is it more important than mechanics, or does it need to be on the same level, or to get a good board game?
I think you need to succeed on both. You can't sacrifice either. You need to capture the story and you need great mechanics. It's hard.
Yeah. And you worked a lot of together with CEO Christian Peterson. Was that hard to work with your boss together on a game?
I feel like the two of us had very similar styles in the types of games that we liked. And so, I mean, he would come up with an idea for a mechanic and he would pitch it to me and I'd be like, oh, yeah, we can find a way to work that in. And I would come up with an idea and pitch it to him and he would get excited about it. So, I mean, he was also running the company. And so a lot of those games that we collaborated on, like I was doing the day-to-day design work and testing and that sort of stuff. But he had a great mind for the things that he liked and the things that he didn't like, and he always held the standards very high, and that is really what you need to like when you're trying to make a great product. Like you want everybody to work to the highest standard that they can, and like that's a driving force for me. And so I like it when people like question my games. I don't like it when I play test a game with people and they're like, oh yeah, it was fun. I'm like, no, tell me what was wrong with it. Tell me how I can improve it. Like,
how can I make it better?
Feedback. Yes.
Now you also revised together, I think, the last edition of Twilight Imperium, the 4th edition. What was your what were your biggest changes for this game? Because this was maybe the first game of Fantasy Flight Games, I think.
Yeah,
one of the most.
Twilight Imperium first edition was.
Yeah, and I think.
So, go ahead.
Oh, I think in those years it been more streamlined and better rule and that kind of stuff. I only played the 4th edition a few times. So what make it even better by your thoughts?
Twilight Imperium 3rd edition was the first Fantasy Flight game I ever played. The first Fantasy Flight game I ever bought. And it was huge and epic, and it really opened my mind to like, oh my gosh, I've never even imagined that a game could be this big and crazy and awesome. And so I think I mentioned earlier that I had worked on like some homebrew rules for Twilight Imperium 3rd edition, and I actually sent it in with my resume when I applied for FFG. Luckily, he liked my ideas because I got the job. And then I later got a chance to work on the expansions for Twilight Imperium 3rd edition. So Shattered Empire I designed, and Shards of the Drone I designed parts of. And some of those things were actually ideas from that homebrew expansion that I had made years and years ago. And so to be able to work on a game that I had loved, it was amazing. And then the fact that he like trusted me to work on those expansions. By the time we came around to the 4th edition, I had a pretty good handle on kind of what the community liked about Twilight Imperium, what were the best parts of it, what were the weaknesses of it. So we had a grand council of people in those meetings. There was Christian, there was me, there was Dane Beltrami, who is the lead designer who worked on the 3rd edition, and we had the creative director of FFG, a whole ton of people in that room there, and we talked about like, what are the best parts of Twilight Imperium 3rd edition that we would want to keep for the 4th edition, and what are the parts that could be improved. And so we talked a lot about like what elements could be better. We talked about politics. We talked about trade. And I think two of my biggest additions were in 4th edition, you've got a player sheet that shows the stats of all of your ships on it. And as you get technologies, you place them on top of those and it alters those stats. In 3rd edition, you just had a small little box on your sheet that said what number you're trying to roll for each ship. And then you'd have cards off to the side that were like, this one gets +1 and this one gets -1 and this one gets +2. And so there was a lot of like memory where you had to be cross-referencing cards and thinking like, oh wait, this one doesn't hit on a 6 because it gets +1 and this one gives it -1. And so that sheet was my idea. And also there were a lot of things that were lifted from the expansions that kind of made it into the 2nd edition. There were the promissory notes, which were you could trade these cards to other players for promises. I definitely added to the new trade system. The trade system in Twilight Imperium 3rd edition was very different. Yeah, the commodities. That was definitely something we wanted to improve, and so I worked with Dane on that, and we came up with that. And so my job on Twilight Imperium 4th edition was basically you had Christian, who was the original designer, you had Dane, who is the designer, a developer of 4th edition, and I was in the middle. And so I was kind of trying to make sure that all of Chris's things that he wanted to have happen came true, all of Dane's things that he wanted to have happen came true, and also like contribute my own ideas and keep everything on track, because it was a huge project. It was a huge team of people.
Yeah, and in the base, Twilight Imperium is, we think with the game group, not a really hard game to learn or kind of stuff, but there's so much around it, and the feeling about you're planning a day, you're waiting for a month to gonna happen, and to sit with 5 man figures in a basement and play a whole day a game. My wife says you're crazy to do this, but also that games bring stories, memories, and you still talk about it after you're done with it.
Absolutely.
Now, I would love to hear something about your own publishing house, Unexpected Games.
So I started Unexpected Games in 2019, and part of my goal was to take some of those ideas for games that I had for years and years and find like a home for them. But I also like know that the industry, thousands of new games come out every year, right? How do you make anybody pay attention to what you're doing? And that's where the whole idea for Unexpected Games came from. Like, well, let's do games that people don't expect. Let's do games that are unusual, that aren't just going to replace a game that's on their shelf, but provide a new gameplay experience that maybe they haven't had. And so our first game was The Initiative, and it's a game that is a cooperative game about kind of breaking codes and mysteries and secrets, and it's a game of layers where there's the story that we're telling, and the story is about a group of teenagers who find a board game at a yard sale, and you are playing the game as them. And the story is told as a comic book within the box. And so before each game you play, you read a page of the comic and it shows you what the kids are up to in their life, and they break out the game and they play it, and then you kind of take over as them and you play it, and then their life moves on, and the game that they're playing and the events that are happening in their life, they're strangely connected, and you're kind of unraveling that story as you go on. And there's just a lot of like, I don't want to like spoil it because of the way that there's lots of things for you to slowly like learn about the game. It's not a legacy game, but it does have you slowly unlocking new mechanics and new rules and cracking codes to find stuff. It's also a game that, unlike I think some of the bigger games that I've made, it plays good with gamers, but it's also a game that you can play with your family. It's pretty easy to explain the basic rules, but there's still a lot of decisions and stuff that you can do as you're working together. And so that was the genesis of like, okay, this is going to be our first game. We're going to kind of set the bar of there's really nothing like this out there. And our next game, we're going to make sure is completely different than that. Because if our second game was just another cooperative game,
it's not unexpected anymore.
It's not unexpected. And so our second game was called Voices in My Head. And that game is about a man who's on trial for robbing a bank. And all the players are the different emotions inside his head. One of you might be honesty, who wants him to tell the truth, even though it'll send him to jail. Somebody else could be selfishness, who doesn't want to go to jail. And so you're taking on these different roles while a trial is going on, and the jury is asking you questions, and evidence is being presented, and you're deciding how to react, and everyone kind of has their own agenda. It's a very crazy game. It's kind of laugh out loud, fun moments. There's this 3D platform that sits in the middle of the table where you're pushing around these discs to take control of different areas of his mind. So it's completely different than the initiative, and probably completely different from anything you've ever played. It's a wild game. I love it.
Cool. It sounds really cool to play.
And then we just released our third game at the end of last year. It's called 3,000 Scoundrels, and that game is once again completely different. It's about it's an alternate history. It takes place in the Wild West, and somebody traveled from the future and brought future technology to this land, and they have since vanished mysteriously. Nobody knows if they're alive or dead, and we are the most influential people in town who are trying to recover the relics that he left behind so that we can control the destiny of the West. And that one, the gimmick is, it's called 3,000 Scoundrels because there's 3,000 unique characters in the game. And they're made using clear cards and normal cards, and you slide them one over the other. You could have a curious judge, and you put those together. Now you've got a curious judge. And not only is it the name that changes, the ability will change based upon the combinations. The artwork will change. You'll have a different head on a different body. Actually, just this morning, we released a creative scoundrel website that you can go on, and you can see all 3,000 scoundrels. You can make your own.
You can swipe them together.
Push a randomizer and get random scoundrels. You can share your favorite ones. Check it out. Unexpectedgames.com. You can see all three of our games, and you can see we've also been making some cool experiences like that 3,000 Scoundrels creator. We had another one for Voices in My Head. We made an online mock trial that you could actually do kind of a choose your own adventure and kind of like see what the game kind of plays like just through our website without actually playing the game. And for the initiative, we also have a web tool where we release free web missions. So we're definitely embracing the idea that our games are more than just what comes in the box, right? We're also
and release a game and go further with other ideas to keep the game more alive in the big fast world of upcoming board games.
Yeah, we release free missions on our website. We release like optional rules, and we just released solo play for 3,000 Scoundrels. So you can actually play that game solo now if you want. So I want when people buy one of our games to not just know that they're going to get something crazy and unexpected, but they're also going to get a game that we love and that we'll support and that we'll build a community around, hopefully.
And is this also, you said earlier, like if Fantasy Flight Games wants me to do something else for them, I will be there. Maybe most of the time, maybe not for everything. Is this, with Unexpected Games, the end for you to make big IP games and just doing, okay, this is a game idea I have, and I don't have anything to do with an IP, or I don't need to tell my story to someone else, and he's gonna say you can do this or you can't do it. Yeah,
Sure.
is this the moment?
I could make an IP game if the right one came around and I had a good idea for one, certainly. I think the point of unexpected is that we have the flexibility to do anything.
Yeah.
As far as collaborating with FFG, yeah, it could certainly happen in the future. I mean, assuming that I have time and we can make it work. It's I am Unexpected Games is a part of Asmodee, so we're all kind of sister companies. We work together on things. Like I worked with Asmodee they created a new version of Timeline called Timeline Twist that I helped them design. That I think it just came out or it's just coming out now. It's like a cooperative way to play Timeline. And so I like collaborating with people. You know, it gives me a chance to step away from what I'm working on now and do something a little different. But I'm also super busy. I only have so much time during the day, and being a small studio, it's just me, and I've got one other person at Unexpected Games, Josh, who helps me make games, but also runs our marketing and social media and stuff. So it's a lot for two people to do.
Yeah. How many people did work at Fantasy Flight Games when you left, or at that biggest point? Because I think a few things they also gave to other publishers at the moment, but
I honestly don't know the exact number. I want to say it was probably in the 70s, but it's weird because how things are broken up, where like when that number was really big, it might have included like sales staff that aren't a part of FFG anymore and they're in Asmodee. And it was definitely one of the biggest publishers in the world as far as board games goes.
And now to do all the work with two people, that is hard.
Yes.
And to design games, to play games, to
so at FFG, I mean, they've got an art team, they've got a graphic design team, they've got producers, designers, developers, like tons of support. When you're working on a game, you've got all of those people to work with and help you out on stuff. It's just the two of us. Now, granted, we do have like the Asmodee sales team and whatnot to help us, and we've got the production team that works with factories and gets the games made, so I don't have to worry about that stuff. But I do have a freelance graphic designer that works for me. When I've got a project, I also will sometimes hire a freelance art director. All my artists are freelancers, but somebody has to manage them. So there's not enough time in the day.
I'm gonna wrap it up, but before that, we have a new thing in the podcast, and that's the dilemma. And I have a dilemma for you. If you can only keep one these games you have designed, what game will it be?
I can only keep one game that I designed. I'll just say Star Wars Rebellion. It's a May the 4th episode. I have to say that.
I think it's a very good choice. And the question: do you maybe have a board game related dilemma that for me and I can ask my brother in our episode?
A board game dilemma for you? Gosh. I guess my question to you will be, what game would you like to see a new edition of?
Okay. I'm gonna ask the question to my brother, and I'm gonna put it in the email when he answers, so you will know it.
Awesome.
Okay, Corey, I really want to thank you for the time you've been taking for this interview. All the best of luck with Unexpected Games and all the hard work to do with two of the people. And I'm really curious with what games you're gonna bring us next. Is there a game upcoming when Spiel Gen Con in America? Is there a release plan for it?
We've got a couple games in the works, but nothing to announce yet.
Okay. Now we shall wait for it. Thanks for your time and to have this chat about all the great games you've designed or helping designed with.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Yeah, thank you.